Hare Krishna, everyone. Our apologies for that. We had some technical difficulties, but we're back on now with part two with Nicolas Paris. So, Nicolas, if you could pick up from where you left off, we were in the middle of talking about how we met each other from your perspective. And yeah, I remember I had just gotten done talking about my experiences talking with you and how every time I had seen your messages or the things you were writing, I always felt very uplifted, you know. So, so if you could continue on, Nicolas, for us with where you left off in this conversation.
Right,
We'll continue.
right on. Mm, yeah, well, I was saying that I find out very interesting that you state truth, even though there were many subject matters of um, difficulties to deal with harmonizing the outside world happenings and the inside realizations with the truth. So I find it very interesting that you kept truth till now, let's say, to the point that I think I appreciate that, and I was appreciating that, and I will keep appreciating that from you and from the people who is treading the path of truth. And I find that also very uplifting that you're telling me that you feel that from me. Well, I was just being me. I was just telling what what we can see is truth. And then you mentioned first things we went like full power into it, like we say. There was topics about the dissensions of the Gaudiya Vaishnav world, the different perspectives of practice, and oh, we went all the way down there, you know. So then, yeah, you were saying that you remember some topics we can pick up. We were already.
Yes. So I remember. So everyone watching this, I know from me very specifically that Nicolas Paris, this person we're talking with, is absolutely a pure devotee of Lord Nityananda. And I'm just not saying this as the standard, of course, which is in our practice, but I'm especially saying this in his case as being specifically true. In the sense of him being a conscious pure devotee. Now, the reason I know this and how I can pick up on this fact is uh, physiologically and also spiritually. Radha and Krishna have confirmed this to me, and so has Nityananda on many occasions. And there's a certainty, there's a certainty factor of this relating to this individual we're speaking with today. So he was one of the individuals who assisted us from the get-go in establishing the Nitai Alliance, the Inter-Universal Harinama Sankirtana movement, and very supportive from the very beginning. So he was one of the founding members of this organization, and was right there on top of things from the very get-go. So we have him to thank for everything. So I encourage you very much so, anyone watching this, please get in contact with him, talk with him. He has very deep realizations about the Radha and Krishna, about Nityananda, their associates, their pastimes, so many things. And so he was actually one of the main people who assisted us in discovering this information about Purnananda, Chandrakanti, and Purnakanti, actually. Interestingly enough, a lot of the things he wrote actually were very helpful to me and Andrew Taylor also in finding a lot information about this specific topic. This topic of which has led us down a very deep rabbit hole of excitement and interesting discoveries. The most recent one, of course, being very deep revelations from the Nityananda Charitamrita about the actual nature of the marginal Jivatma and how being marginal is actually a very uplifting thing. There's a lot of amazing facts about the marginal Jivatmas that are quite often hidden and encoded in scripture also. So just like we see a lot of things encoded scripturally relating to Purnananda, Chandrakanti, and Purnakanti, we also run into many things encoded about the marginal Jivatma that are never necessarily openly said, I guess you could say. But you'll find these facts there in the scriptures, and if you look deep enough. But what's interesting about this is that, and me and you have been talking about this the last few days, Nicolas, that this topic of the marginal Jivatma is very rarely discussed in depth. In terms of like the why, like the reasons. So, because a lot of times I think people will look at the situation and they'll just look at, okay, there's the internal potency Jivatmas. Yes, they have free will, but they never misuse their free will. Then there's the marginal potency Jivatmas, who eternally remain marginal, even when in Goloka, right? But so I guess the question is that people really should be asking, and that we've definitely gone very in depth in recently, is, well, what is the reason those particular group of living entities prefer to stay marginal? Because nothing is forced on a Jivatma that they don't actually desire, ultimately. So there's a reason, of course, they desire to be marginal, but very few people actually ask this question. Well, what would be the advantage to being marginal versus completely internal as a Jivatma? And there are actually many advantages to this, in fact. So yeah, just if you could talk kind of from your end regarding these things, and maybe some insights you've had on this, my friend. Because I know
Well, first,
you have had many insights on this, I'm sure.
I really don't have on my own, but I could say that well, the way we can look at things in a very cohesive way would be that to be marginal is what we have heard of being in potency of Krishna as the Tathashta, where the consciousness of the Jiva Atma is fine itself, right? Um, so being, we can say the margin of something is like the frame, like a frame. When you write, the margin is where the page finished.
That's right.
So in that sense, the potency, being the potency of the omnipotent one, means that we are that limit as far as he can go. I mean, in each and every one means we come with something in common already. That is what we can understand now, the omnipotent one. So let's see it from that sense. All of us are part of this omnipotency, but we are in the far ends. And then when we read in the Shastra Praman would say, yeah, you can prove this in the Bhagavad Gita when it says that, I don't have the verse in mind, because actually what I'm saying is that I don't really own these things. I'm just there in the frames. So it takes for me a little bit to find that source. I'm not the whole omnipotent one. So I'm really ashamed to have such a big prize to myself. I just give it all to those who are already positioned themselves mm, into, let's say, farther beyond than the margin that they already are by default. So what we see is that we can project our vision, and that in the Gita it says that there's a um, well, what we find in the Gita, the quote means, we are part of him in the way that he realizes himself. You know what I mean to say, that being so much internal, then why we are here? We would not find any sense of being here than just having a great go from here, right? I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
just using logics, but what we find is this, that devotees who are even in the level of acharyas, you can say, that they are by example showing us like their own teaching or their own realization. You don't find a similar acharya to another one. They are all having their own experiences. They're having their own realizations. They're having something in common. Yeah, we can say we are this Shakti of Krishna we have in common, right? But so from this um, to put ourselves, let's say, uh, in a position that we cannot relate to the acharyas is just completely uh, breaking the the connection that already is there. I'm just going with the flow. I think like um, what we have already discovered. Let's say we, as a part of it, we have discovered that yes, there are advantages of finding ourselves here, even in the um, sense that there is this opportunity to make your own path, right? As nobody else has done, and is the same valuable for everyone, and it's so precious because that's what also is really let's say enjoyable for Krishna as the omnipotent to go as far as you can go with you also to realize himself, and then that's what is also the relishment. He's relishing also as you relish, you know. So it's something that I think is just as beautiful as to find a sense of being, and not just cursing yourself because you have a this form in this world or whatever, you know. So at some point people deny it, and we just think like this is just a curse and thing. We have to deny this form and just escape from here. And I think that's just running away from themselves, you know?
Yes, very true. Very much so. The both the internal and external are very eternally important to all of us as the marginal jivatmas. And what I find so fascinating about this fact is that, at least what I've realized individually in my own life, is that that true meaning of marginality is that you have the eternal ability to customize, and be accommodated, I should say. So you have the eternal ability to customize your experience with Radha and Krishna and other jivatmas, and also you have the ability to have your desires in relationship to them completely accommodated for your individual needs, basically. And that's actually the real definition of marginal from what I've seen, from what I've found. And so even when we're fully in Goloka, fully surrounded by the Vrajadama and everything else, and all the associates, we even then still find that we are still marginal in that state, in the sense that the marginality now is experienced in all of these accommodations we're getting, right, from them, from Nityananda specifically, from Radha Krishna, from all living entities. And that accommodation factor is the very source of our potential to misuse that accommodation, right? Whereas when you're
Mm.
dealing with the eternally liberated associates, they actually don't have these needs and urges for accommodations, because the way they use their free will is always specifically according to Radha and Krishna's personal version. You see, so I found this is very interesting. So in essence, to put it
Mm.
quite simply, Radha and Krishna have given the marginal living entities um, a unique use of free will, in the sense that, okay, you can actually desire and have urges that are distinct from our personal preferences in terms of Goloka, how we experience transcendence, etc. Whereas the eternally liberated associates, they assign them, okay, you will always be in a line with our vision no matter what. And this is how your free will would be used, basically. So depending on which group of jivatmas one is in association with, so the marginal especially being in association with, of course, Purnananda, Balarama, and Nityananda, because he is the accommodator. He is the accommodator expansion of Radha and Krishna. We find that as marginal jivatmas, our association with Nityananda is especially important for this in this regards, because he's specifically the one that accommodates our needs and urges. And I find this fascinating too. This is a huge chunk of the reason why Nityananda, in particular, how and why he specifically is the way he is and his consciousness is because he's actually why he's able to bring us to Radha and Krishna quickly, because what he does is he brings us to our customized relationship Goloka. So basically he brings us to our version of Goloka with them. That's what Nityananda does. Whereas if one tries to be directly devoted to Radha and Krishna and not so much paying attention to Nityananda also, they really very much have to be in line 100% with Radha and Krishna's personal version, you see, of Goloka. And in order to be there, right? In order to be in Goloka with them. Whereas with Nityananda, he's actually there specifically to facilitate your accustomed desires. It's like a mundane example would be this. A bunch of people are in a house, right? And so the eternally liberated associates, the eternally free associates, are the ones who just like the house exactly as the house is, exactly how the pictures are aligned, everything's set up, and they're always forever totally happy with that setup. And they will always be happy with that setup. Whereas the marginal Jivatmas, they look around and they're like, oh, I kind of like this picture to be moved over here. I'd like to scoot this couch a little over this way. I'd like to stand this table over here in the corner. See? So the marginal Jivatmas, it's the same location, same place. It's just a rearranging of the pastimes and a rearranging of how they like to experience those pastimes, you see? So in the end of the day, really, that's the only difference, distinction-wise, between marginal Jivatmas and internal potency Jivatmas, is that one has that eternal desire for a certain accommodation version of that Goloka, which Nityananda facilitates and allows. And whereas the eternally liberated associates, they are totally happy with what you could call the standard version of Goloka that Radha and Krishna themselves personally prefer, you see. Which is very...
Well,
when I realized this visual and this whole dynamic, for me, this has answered, at least for myself, all of my questions that I have ever had in this regards. And of course, this topic is much deeper, but in essence, to give people kind of an overall example of what the principle we're talking about. So in essence, what I like to encourage devotees in is be excited and be happy and understand the blessings of being marginal, that you actually have a special blessing in certain ways that the eternally liberated associates also don't even have, so a very unique blessing. You see what I mean? So, which is, I find quite fascinating myself.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah.
The main characteristic I find, which is relating to what you have just expressed, is that there is no such a thing as a standard or standardized feature of the all-potent Leela, let's say omnipotent Leela in the Nitai Dham. Nitai Dham means just the eternal Goloka. It's Nitai Dham actually, because when we know that from all the potencies that reside in the potent one, in the supreme, what we could say marginally, the supreme, as he's customizing it. But in that perspective, when we say uh, we are part of, when we recognize we are part of, and we start to go with it, then it's not already our own thing. But that is a perspective uh, of a let's say marginal conscious, which is already subject. But the thing about going to the dam on the all potent realm means that it's full of shaktis, means that you can uh, go there in the sense that when you are there already, then you understand that you are not merging of it anymore, because it's all potent. It's not only there is no only one way, to for the marginal consciousness to reach to the omnipotent place, which is everywhere.
Correct.
So, and as that is so, everyone can find its way to find himself into that atmosphere. And it's when I would like to explain why um, there is no only one way to see what the information we get of how it is. Let's say we hear as a tradition have the chance, or let's say have a particular uh, option, we can say, to perceive of that nature. Because when we are here in a marginal state and we figure out that there is an atmosphere which is kind of different, we can say, then we get the tradition. I was explaining before the video cut it, that to figure out whatever we have heard, whatever we can remember, and whatever it's there from the ancient time, we need to figure out really how the Vedic system works. This is Shruti, Smriti, and Purana. And these days, everything is so lost in oblivion. Really, when we have to figure all this out, it's such a big map, but actually, it's very synthesized. And so I explain about tradition because tradition is actually something that remains in the world, for the world and of the world. And but when we speak of transcendental tradition, well, we can say, okay, this is a custom, this is a custom-made uh, culture or something like this. But it is really, really different than a normal mm, way to live or to perceive life to the natives. But there is nothing to envy about. It's just from a different perspective of living, validity. So why I speak about it is because we see that now we mention who is there and the identities that have reached there. Um, we know we have in common that we have studied this book that is from Tatapada, Sripad Krishnadas Babaji, Siddha Krishnadas Baba, and he explained about one day, right? One day, as a custom made for the marginal uh, mm, jiva who has really an interest or the desire to to understand a little bit about how is it this the eternal realm, right, where everything is happening everywhere and every time about what, right? What the thing is, when we know, okay, this is Radha Krishna Lila, right? And then every day there is a new color, and that sort of consciousness, Here we set up all the colors, we already know them, but there every day there is a new color. Every day Srimati Radharani cooks something new that Krishna has never tried. Can you figure out that we're there? It's just we are amazed to figure out something new every day, and when we get new revelations here, that's when I understand that what we are talking about has a deep purpose, and I find that nobody has spoken about in the sense that we have been speaking about it. And
Yes.
I tell you why. I find many things interesting in that sense because I was figuring out, okay, so Krishna is okay consorted and consorting with Srimati Radhika, his internal potency, and then we see, but everything is arranged by the form of Sankarshan, his first expansion. How we could say there are many different expansions, but he's a specific one that plays that role of manifesting everything for him, everything around him, and all of it. It's like Purnamasi, so many different ways he's around all the Krishna Lila manifesting characters, to make it happen. And then we are speaking about this is Sankarshan and the jivas, the relation to him in so many ways that we can say that, of course, it's Nitai who can bring us in our own perspective to be welcome as we are, not as we have to be like, you know. So, what about this one day? We just have information of one day, and it's just a little bit described in this one book or with Krishna and Kaviraj Goswami, that it is okay, it's Rupa Goswami that give him a little poem This is like eight stanza poem that Rupa Goswami has given to Krishna's Kaviraj, and he manifested so many verses out of it. So you see, the little specks that Rupa Manjari is having is given to the other Manjari, who is the Krishna's Kaviraj, and Krishna's Kaviraj has manifested such a big. How many verses are there in the Govinda Lilamrita, right? And this tradition uh, continued after we see this is we can speak about this the frame of the Bhagavad Dharma, which is there. Sri Krishna, as Babaji explained, it is Sara Bhavana Sara Sangraha also. So much many also, and it's expanding. So what we find as the important aspect that ever expanding, and it's just one day. Figure out how many days are there. They are there for half of Brahma's life or something. The Rasa Lila is as long as half of Brahma's day. This is just eternal play, and it's ever manifesting. And the nature. How can we just think that we are going there marginally? What we're speaking is just like we can have a perspective from here of this marginality, but an eternal devotee who is there conscious of what he's doing or what is or experiencing it every second, and living in that mood, and knowing his own emotions by every features, is something that is it cannot be just a frame to fit inside, you know but people in the world, like you're saying, just tend to move, figure things like this. So I have to do like this. So let me put this like that. How about this there? And give me that. And I give you this. And it's just like, it's not a mechanical thing, It's just something that goes with the, we can say, is the mood that if we understand now. Let's say you mentioned Nitai. So the Nitai mood. Now, I was something surprised about finding out, but what we are saying now is that um, I was trying to figure out exactly about this determined of Balaram, the Mula Sankarsha, the root of this principle. So it's very important, this Sankarshan. The root of this principle means that he also consorts with his internal potency, and that when we know from the Gaur Lila, he had two wives, and who knows many more potencies, but the infinite. But that's fun because I tried to figure out this past tense about Sankarshan consorting with someone, and then what I hear is that okay, Anangamanjari, which is Janavama, so there we have this principle, but here we see they are consorting, and Janavama is just the wife of Nityananda, but she doesn't have a baby of him. Like she took up the spiritual, um, mm, let's say, tradition, and that and um, what's her name? Basuda, the sister. Basuda, who's Basuda? I tried to figure out who is Basuda, who is Basuda, who is Basuda, and it's not really clear already. So I was trying to figure out, okay, now we know Janavama is Anangamanjali, but then does Balaram consort Anangamanjali? I don't think it's like that there. Because one thing is, we speak about this is the Parakiya Bhav. There they are a little far from age, not the same, they're a little farther because Balaram is a little older than Krishna. So Radha and Krishna are more like close in age, but Manjari and Manjari is a little younger from Radharani. So is the bigger brother consorted with the small sister, you know. So they are, of course, Krishna's brother and Radharani's sister. So in Rajalila, but who is Vasudha there? So that's what took me into this realization that you're speaking about, who is Purnananda. Why we hear is Purnananda consoling him. The first time I hear this was when we understood that Gadai, or I call it Gadai because Gadadhar people confuse this with Gadadhar Pandit, who is Radharani's Vilas. But in Gaulila, Nityananda is is consorting, right? So I don't know if Vasuda, who is giving children, just listen to this, who is giving children to Nitai, is Purnananda. And one aspect is that one of his disciples, you follow, of his disciple, one of his disciples, that is Gadai, is also a merging aspect of two gopis. Then we are threading here, right? This is um, the Gopi Bhav that comes in Gadhai as Nitai disciple is two Gopi, which is what is mentioned because we have two versions. We hear from Gaurgana Deepika and we hear also that I think is maybe Chaitanya Chaitamrita that this Gadhai is also Radharani's luster. Radharani's luster, right? His Kanti, Chandrakanti, she's like the moon, right, of Raja. We could say like this because it's also a relishment of the poetry of Raj. So what is it? Is that the mellow that's coming from Chandrakanti as the Gopi is the personification of Radharani's uh, uh, luster, right? Is in this disciple of Nitai, but this disciple of Nitai also in the Gopi Bhav has Purnananda Bhav or Gopi Bhav. So what happened is there, what is this? We I just find this in one sense. There is one seed, there is one seed, right? The seed is closed, but it has two sides, right? Like Gaur, Radha Krishna, right? There is one seed. So the seed is what the tradition is speaking about also with um, uh, the giving of bhakti, as we hear from this the let's say the literal aspect is that is given in a seed from an associate who has bhakti. That devotee plants it in the heart, and then as practice it will grow as a plant. But this seed um, in Gadai as a disciple of Nityananda is a seed of Gopi Bhav. So more specifically, um, there is a lot to say about this because who can consort with Balaram as the Mahasankarshan or the Mula Sankarshan? Who is this Shakti, you know? It's so amazing that you are giving so much into it. And I really appreciate it. Nobody is really speaking about a very essential matter as this. And I think it's the right time also that it's not alone. It's not alone. This seed is just one side, which you have to consider. One side is this, and the other side is Chandra Kanti. So that's when I came up with the or we were speaking, you know, that is Purna, the complete, you know, Kanti or um, luster, the complete luster of, of, of who or what, right? So let's say, you know, that's when I say, but there is more to what we are saying all the time. It's just like then if we figure out what who is this really Gadai, because there is this two side of the practice of we are saying we're speaking about raga bhakti, and that is like we can put it this way that you know that there's two swarup that the Gaudiya Vaishnav um, is personified like the Sadak Vesh, which is in the Gaur Lila, and it's no different to the Siddha Swarupa of the complete emotional or emotive form of the devotee in the Braja Lila. So this two side also is there. Then, but this is what the devotee is experiencing here, as a full. So the whole thing that Chintya Veda Veda Tattva is there in the sense that if you see Gadai has these two gopi aspect of him, of his bhav, right? But there is a more specific, and that's what I think is not yet disclosed. And I've been trying to find out this for a long time. But that's what the let's say the more um, inquisitive devotees would determine as what we know of the confidential sadhana of the Manjari Bhav. So I think that's his Manjari Swarup that we already don't know his name. It might be known, and I think that it will be disclosed when we get to that aspects.
Yes, I'm sure. It's very interesting. So, anyone watching right now, to clarify, um, in brief, the topic we're discussing, so that people aren't confused coming in. So, there's a book called Lalita Madhava. I believe that is specifically the one that this play was in. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Nicolas. Is the one book that has the play that was written by Swami that talks about how Radha and the gopis and with Krishna they actually walked over from Vrindavana to Dvaraka and became his queens. I'm just trying to make sure it's either that one or Vidagda Madhava.
These two are poetic plays that Rupa Goswami write.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So Rupa Goswami, these two, and in this literature you can find the descriptions that Sri Radha actually walks over to Dvaraka and is literally, so Satyabhama is literally 100% Sri Radha. Same exact personality form, everything else, just in a different Leela. So basically Radha walking over to Dvaraka with Krishna, she is Satyabhama. And Chandravali, who is Sri Radha's rival in Vrindavana, normally, who's considered basically like the second gopi, the rival of Sri Radha, she walks over to Dvaraka and actually becomes Rukmini. Now, they end up doing this in a disguised manner, and many of the queens who were captured from Balmasura were actually the gopis themselves, many of them. So this was another secret aspect of the story revealed in this play. So what's interesting about this is, of course, Purnananda is Balarama's main gopi, just like Sri Radha is the main gopi of Sri Krishna. So Purnananda also, very likely, walks over from Vrindavana to Dvaraka as a specific gopi. Now, we know that Revati in Dvaraka is the associate of Balarama, and he also had a few other wives. The other wives' names I'm not recalling at the moment, but
Vasuda.
Vasuda also in Dvaraka.
Do you understand?
Well, yes, and this is what I was getting to actually. So I'm thinking that very likely Purnananda herself walked over to Dvaraka and took the role, similar to Sri Radha, as the secondary gopi of Balarama, like you're saying. And then
Right.
the other rival, whoever Purnananda's rival is, in Vrindavana, which is yet to be determined as far as I understand, walked over to Dvaraka and became the main queen of Balarama. And so, Nicholas, what were the names of the two gopis of Balarama in Dvaraka Leela? It was Revati, and what was the other one in Dvaraka Leela? We know
I think it's Vasuda, wives of Balarama. This I think is Vasuda.
Vasuda also in Dvaraka Leela.
You see, there I find a matching because
See, we know in Chaitanya Leela that Vasuda was the wife of Balaram, which I feel I agree with you on that. That's correct. But the name of the wife in Dvaraka Leela, aside from Revati, there was another wife That's the name I'm trying to recall right now. Do you remember?
Yeah,
There was
yeah, I
Raven.
think it's just that because there is Revati and Vasudha, I think it's called. If not, if I'm wrong, but it's same with V, like
Okay.
Vasudha. I think it's called the same, like we know of,
So
you
she
know.
has the same name in Dvaraka Lila as well as Chaitanya Lila. Then,
So that
because
means,
very likely, very interesting.
yeah,
Now,
that
what?
means that.
Yeah, that means what we've been talking about is correct. Actually, that what you're mentioning is definitely correct in the sense that well, wherever a consort of Balarama is, Purnananda, of course, expands herself as all the consorts, but we can see that Purnananda specifically manifests herself as Vasudha Mata, like you're saying, Chaitanya Lila. But this is very fascinating because, of course, Radha and the other gopis, Purnananda and their other groups, they continue to extend into, as you're saying, Chaitanya Lila and Nityananda Lila as well. So basically, what we're getting at here, anyone watching who's might be confused at this point.
No, no, it's not Vasudha. Her name is Varuni.
Varuni, okay, there we go. That's right. That's what I was looking for. That name. Okay, so yes, so that gopi, I'll have to see if I can find out if there was a similar thing that went on with Purnananda and whoever her rival was. So whether that was actually the pastime rival of Purnananda, and they together went over to Dvaraka with Balarama, like Radha and Chandravali did as Rukmini, or I should say as Satyabhama and Rukmini. So what's interesting is in Dvaraka Lila, the role was reversed between Radha and Chandravali because the mood of Dvaraka is different in the sense that when Radha's mood of controlling Krishna in Vrindavana is the mood that he likes to be under the control of Sri Radha. But Chandravali's mood in Vrindavana is always, I'm your servant, Krishna, I'll do whatever you want. And that mood actually predominates in Dvaraka, which is why Rukmini was allowed the first position, or Chandravali was allowed the first position in Dvaraka Lila, and Radha took the second position in Dvaraka voluntarily. So we can see that a similar thing happened between Purnananda and whoever her rival may be in Vrindavana Lila, um, which is a very mysterious individual that I haven't been able to come across that I know of yet in the scriptures, who Purnananda's playtime rival is. So determining, in fact, finding out who that is, who Purnananda's
I'm trying to figure this principle, but we cannot say it's the same for Krishna than for Balaram. They are
right,
not just same thing.
there may be a
It's
different
just,
dynamic. It's possible.
yeah, it's a different dynamic. But if it's very similar in one sense, we can find out how they are different to be similar.
Yeah,
Because if you see there is a um, like an enemy kind of mood from Radha to Chandravali in the Lila, then in the Balaram Lila, this aspect of um, enemy is more like a mood that in his Lila they will not just represent the same as in Krishna Lila. You understand? It may be even an Angamanjali, which is not really uh, like consorting Balaram, but they are same, you
yeah.
know.
There may be an element of this involved. So this will be a next good lead-in for our next conversation. Actually, I think this topic is the very thing we'll have very interesting realizations on next
Another
time.
thing, you just mentioned also to clarify one thing that when we're speaking about the Braja Lila, and then we go into Dwarka Lila, then it's a different setup. When you say that they took the roles, is one type of expansion. You can read this in the Lagu Bhagavatamrita, and there is explained how are these expansions considered the same but different, because from that all of the rasa upasana, it's very clear, and you find clues every step, because you say, for example, Radharani goes to be Satyabhama, or Chandravali goes to be Rukmini. It's because relating to Krishna in his own experience. they are also consorting in a opposite mood. This all of this type of rasas or moods relating to him, Krishna, are explained by Rupa Goswami as well in the Ujjwala Nilamani. How much you find in every step is as much as we are figuring out. So what I find interesting is that we can make that clear just by getting the proper perspective of the practice, which we are saying the Gaudiya Vaishnava practice is a rasa, relishing bhakti, the relishing of the rasas and the proper distinctions are already done by those who um, have done it. We just can look at that way. So um, it's not like they are really the same, just in another setup. It's just that the mood is they are personified. In
I see what you're
Radha.
saying, my friend. What this is very interesting. So the scenario could be one of two things that we're referring to. There could be different variations of the pastime. One in which Sri Radha literally walks over, because this is what I found very intriguing about this was the way he describes this in the play. He's very emphatic, actually, that
In the play,
literally,
yeah.
yes, that literally Sri Radha herself, specifically, same form, walks over to Dvaraka and plays the role of Satyabhama, not just a mood and not just a different individual in the mood of Sri Radha, but literally actually her directly. Okay, sure, she may have shifted her form in terms of appearance, etc., but in the play, at least, that's how he described it. So there may be one version of the pastime where that plays out, where Sri Radha literally goes over, and another version where she doesn't go over literally, and then has someone else play the role, but she expands her mood into another expansion of herself. There
It
could be
means,
there could
yeah.
be both, yeah, variations. That's possible.
What we find in the if we knew Sanskrit, man, because what we find in the translation is that he expressed in this way. You can imagine how it's Sanskrit, meaning of Rupa Goswami, who is the best of poets.
Yeah.
He's explaining in the sense that it's her. Why would she go outside of Vrindavan to play that there? You know, if when she's in Kurukshetra, she's telling Krishna, "We are here, everyone is here, but this is not Raj,
Hmm.
right?"
That's
So at that point, we can understand what is the mood that Rupa Goswami is trying to uh, mm, touch. When he's poetic, saying, "Yeah," but we just determine also, yes, Balaram is Krishna also, but there is a distinction. It's not that they are different; it's just there is a distinction. So all the Shaktis of the Shaktiman are distinct from each other, but it's not that they are different. It is him.
yeah.
So that's interesting. What I have also experienced this is that yeah, when we hear the translations into the modern language, so many assumptions are there that can maybe just slightly, you know, do like slice the mood in a way that is not the main thing. It's everything. That's why I'm explaining from internally that we need to understand their mind, not the English words, per se. I mean, that's something that has for me been a little bit difficult. But when I try to figure out, when I tap into what these devotees are really looking at, then you get a perspective more clear of whatever their words are translated today. So then you don't have so many problems of trying to see or ambition so many encodings that are there.
Yes, good point. And what I find fascinating about this too is, yeah, when I'm reading their pastimes and their writings, you can very much see that um, their depth of vision on all of these things is absolutely just incredible. So for the viewers, to clarify further a little bit, if so they don't get confused, also is that so as we were discussing before, Nityananda's function, of course, in relationship to the Jivatmas, especially the marginal Jivatmas, we understand that he, the reason why, I should say, a devotee who is, someone is considered a pure devotee in affectionate association with Nityananda, much more, much more immediately and much more encompassingly than one who may not necessarily specifically be focusing on Nityananda as much, for the simple fact that Nityananda has made that individual's customized desires and urges objective reality, and that Radha and Krishna also agree to that being objective reality. So as we understand the infinite versions of Goloka, or infinite versions of the pastimes, or experiences of the pastimes, Radha and Krishna agree that to agree to the individual's preferred view of the pastimes to be their also preference that they agree with. Whereas in the case of one trying to directly approach Radha and Krishna in Chaitanya, there's a requirement for the Jivatma trying to do that to actually be 100% in line with Radha and Krishna's personal preferences. Since Radha and Krishna, of course, have their own preferences because they're personalities and individuals, the way they like to play things out, one who doesn't specifically contact Nityananda will have to completely be in line with Radha and Krishna's preferences on all levels. But with Nityananda, Radha and Krishna agreed that your preferences become their preferences, you see. So I found this very fascinating in my own life, in my own devotion of things. And when I mention something that I know to be true, or I'm certain is true, Radha and Krishna always confirm one way or the other within my heart and mind, And so these topics are incredibly important that devotees understand this, that the gopis of Balarama, so Purnananda and her associates, everything related to them is very secretive. So more secretive than Radha and her gopis even. So even in the pastimes that we do have about them, it describes how they specifically run away when the cowherd boys come, right? When Balarama's consorting with the gopis, whereas Krishna stays there with Sri Radha, and they just keep laughing, basically. So there's all these hints at how secretive they actually are, right? And the fact that their names are very rarely mentioned, So I think we're very close. I'm certain this is found in the writings of the Acharyas, but the specifics of exactly who these individuals are who have transferred over and what their behaviors are would be very interesting to find.
One big example is what we just find about Gadai Thakur,
Exactly.
and that also is a very, very interesting from the respect of the tattva and the siddhanta of Gora.
Yes.
Gadai, because if it's coming through Nityananda, it hasn't been displayed before, as much as there is no in the Bhagavatam. There is no mention much in also let's say the acharyas are not really mentioned much more.
Right.
Like what we are trying to type into is something that is not manifested.
That's right.
It's in the unmanifest stage.
This brings me to an interesting thing, Nicholas. Point that I want to mention before I forget. The relating to this exactly. So basically, in all of the standard scriptures, so the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, any scripture that's recognized across the board as being a standard authorized shastra, will not have, by default, a lot of this information related to Nityananda, Purnananda, and their stuff in it. And the reason for that is, or the stuff related to the marginal Jivatma, and the reason for that being, all of those scriptures are written according to the Radha and Krishna's personal preference perspective, in the sense, and not only that, from the perspective of individuals who are eternally liberated with them and are not marginal in nature. So those are considered the authorized scriptures. So yes, scriptures may be written with deeper realizations, or I should say deep realizations related to Nityananda, related to all of these things. However, if those scriptures are put together by marginal potency Jivatmas, in the vast majority of cases, those scriptures will never be accepted as authorized under any circumstances, simply for the fact that those scriptures are tailored to that individual marginal Jivatma's eternal perspectives and preferences. Whereas you have like Bhagavatam and all these other things. So Vyasadeva, for example, writing Bhagavatam, being an eternally liberated associate, and also a direct expansion of Krishna, or I should say an avatar of Krishna and a power of.
That explains why the gopis are not yet disclosed. They are hidden in their own experiences.
That's
It's
right.
it's for their own selves.
Hmm.
Of of yeah of let's say any um, um, conception.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, this is amazing too, because a lot of times people they'll think automatically, okay, if something's written by a marginal potency individual or somebody, they'll always be relating it to the objective reality scriptures. So, in other words, Radha Krishna's preferences and the eternally liberated associates who don't have that customization element to their free will, the way that the marginal potency Jivatmas do. So when a lot of times things are relayed by the marginal potency Jivatmas, if they don't 100% line up with those, they for sure won't be accepted. And so this is what I find so fascinating about the Purnakanti topic, is that everything related to her has to do with this exactly, where every experience with her, every interaction with her is very much so tailored to each individual Jivatma, marginal potency living being, to the point that it's simply not possible to have her put in any type of authorized text or standard text ever for the rest of eternity. And so this intrigued me very much. I was very intrigued. I was racking my brain and meditating on this for a long time, asking Radha and Krishna, why is it that in the standard shastras, these eternally liberated associates, and of course we've gotten answers since then, but the prayer was, why haven't they specifically mentioned the personality who is the light shining from Krishna's form? Why did they just always refer to this light as the Brahma Jyoti? Why don't they ever describe the personality? Why did they just describe the light, coming from the form of Krishna? And that, of course, we've discussed the details as to many reasons why that is. But another part of the reason is, genuinely speaking, they may not actually, being eternally liberated associates, they may not actually have visions of this particular gopi, of Purnakanti. They may not, and this surprises me. But I mean, I look at it objectively, and I'm thinking, well, there's obviously a reason why they're not specifically recognizing this, because being personalists, we know that every so-called thing is actually a person, ultimately in reality, and that there's no things or just concepts. So the fact that they keep describing the Brahmajyoti as just the Brahmajyoti always intrigued me, in the sense that they're basically, if a person doesn't look further into that, then they're just going to get left with an impersonally tinged ideology, Whereas when this dawns on the individual, asking, wait, who is this person then? Why does this person keep getting brushed aside? Then all these things start flooding in. But I mean, I look at all these scriptures, I look at all the Puranas, the Vedas and stuff, and why is her personality never specifically mentioned? The luster of Sri Radha is mentioned, her expanded luster is mentioned, Purnananda and Chandrakanti, but the luster that emanates from the form of Sri Krishna is never mentioned in terms of who that personality is. So, and so this is, and as we discussed before, and in the Andrew Taylor videos we did and stuff relating to her, we've come to so many realizations related to this point. But there's an element here, though. There really is an element of there's a certain perspective, common ground perspective, that the eternally liberated associates of Radha and Krishna have, that that they simply don't see. There's certain things they don't see that the marginal Jivatmas see, and vice versa. There's certain things that we don't see that the eternally liberated associates see also.
Like what?
Well, specifically in relationship to, number one, the main thing is the advantage. So the marginal Jivatmas, we don't see the advantage eternally of agreeing 100% to Radha and Krishna's own preferred version of the pastimes. Okay? Whereas the eternally liberated associates do see the advantage in that. We, however, do see the advantage in customized, tailored experience.
Perspective. Like when we say, you have half of the water full of water, half of the cup.
Yep.
Half a full of water. And some people see the cup half empty. Some people will say it's half full.
Exactly.
Perspective. If you see the practice from the perspective of Balarama, Purnananda Balaram, and then you see it from the perspective of Radha Krishna, it is, or half full or half empty, just as example for this kind of people in perspective. You understand what I'm saying? Then what happened is that Chandrakanti, it's special in the Radha Krishna Lila, because it plays that aspect that it's very important to know in the Lila always why is Sri Krishna come as a devotee, because he also sees this as the uh, all light, you can say, all light. But there is a aspect that Punakanti at this moment is in one way that we can uh, perceive is a um, harmonization of these both perspectives, right?
Yes.
Why? Because it may not be called Punakanti. What I'm saying is that Punakanti is the version we can understand of it now.
Yes.
But his name or her name, his name we know, but her name, same, Gadai Thakur, may be a specific Manjari who is in a specific emotion of his name, the Bhav, right? That is explained in the Ekadash Bhav. Because this tradition comes from Nitai, I am trying to know that what exactly is that devotee in this form. So emotionally, um, why is so interesting? Because in the sense that we know from Nitai that he could help Gauranga Deva, Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, further than what up to the far that he could come to be a sannyasi, you know, that he has to roam alone to do his bhajan. And actually a sannyasi is the one who's going by foot everywhere. He cannot use any transports. He cannot wear watches and computers and do big uh, meetings or whatever, trying to figure out how we will do with the masses. That's not what a sannyasi is about. A sannyasi has to be closed in his room or traveling. So actually, he was about it, the topmost sannyasi, and I am sure that it's very difficult to reach that point of being a sannyasi. But himself, who is the most let's say renunciate, which is Krishna. He has everything, but he renounced it all. So who is managing this? Is what we know of. Even
And
his brother is their Vishwarup, who is Sankararanya, is also part of this Mahasankarshan. You know
yes,
that also, and him, and then what happened there is Nitai is assisting. You see
that's right.
that what if we see Raganuga Bhakti is about the Smaran, Lila Smaran. So there is everything, Guna Rupa, you know, and Nama. The Nama we just saw, who's Sankara, Mahasankarsha, Sankara Rania, and then this is Vishwarupa, and then that is also as he goes, he couldn't perceive that his pastimes of as a sannyasi of Krishna, Chaitanya. So he goes in Nitai also. That means the Nitai is our only shelter for us in that sense that he's leading that um, into the depths of what we can find in that what I mentioned in the beginning is what is there the Siddhanta, the conclusion, and the tattva of truth. The conclusion of truth means that he is that and he is giving that, and from him is that what we can get to relish that the mood. What is that? Only he can say.
Beautiful. See, I love seeing you go really in depth into, into seeing all this very deep insights.
But you can see it. You can see it really. It's just like there are some things I think. Uh, people don't give their own time to
Mhm.
figure out because they think, no, it's too much, or who knows that. But when you are determined to find out, the door is open and then it starts to come.
That's
I
right.
just think there is something that we can really try to understand because we also hear like someone speaking about what they are realizing, but he's just one aspect. There is so much more. So to make a cult around one person is also maybe tailor made for that person, but not for everyone.
Sure. Yep. And that's why it's so amazing. That's why I always say they're all together. Radha Krishna Nityananda, everyone, all their associates, always working together. And this is the most important perspective to have. Never having a perspective of isolating one from the others. Under any circumstances. But even if the emphasis or focus is on one or the other, the togetherness factor is always appreciated very much so, very deeply.
You mentioned something important there that I find because there are various, let's say, let's take it from the aspect of the philosophy. Now is what we hear from the Goswamis who have taken up assisting also Mahaprabhu, right? In this wake, they explain, let's say, maybe not so far to the Sadhu Goswami, maybe Vishwanath Chakravarti who comes after. He's speaking about further into depth of the Raganuga Bhakti, and that Raganuga Bhakti is something that you cannot start off Raganuga Bhakti. You have the way to understand what is that raga from someone who has that raga, for the object of raga. So that is a person, like Atmika, is a person who has that raga, and when you associate with that person, then you develop that raga, and then you can start to perform the raga anuga and anugatya, following in that wake of a mood. So not everyone has the same attraction. Not everyone has to do it around Nitai. Not everyone has to do it around Advaita. Not everyone has to do it around Gadadhar. Not everyone has to do it around Srivas to get to let's say experience what is about Mahaprabhu, right? At this time. But their own will drive them there. So the eternal associate, the Nitya Parsada of Gauranga, has something in particular of himself that some people can relate to, and they will just gather there and they will grow. Let's say this is the Raganuga tradition that we hear from. But then there is this something called Nityananda Paramaradhya or Advaita Paramaradhya or Gadadhar Paramaradhya, and they all have their different aspects from where they stand to perceive the truth, because the truth relates to you from where you start to see it. So if we start from this point, then we know that we can help for some. We can be of help for some. If we know there are other ones standing from another perspective, they are also are to be conscious that they can be of help of some others, and they will everyone. That's how it works. But then it's very interesting because if you see, we can see it from here that we should be aware of what is. We would look at Nitai in this way, or Janava Nitai, Vasuda Janava Nitai. Yeah, you would see it from this way. Then we should be aware um, who is, let's say, their leader in the Rajdam of this Gopi Bharat. So it's known, for example, Advaita Parivar. This is known that Advaita is Vishaka Gopi in this, but then here he is the big aspect is he is Mahavishnu and the Sadashiva merger, you can say. You see, it's always the same principle in another aspect there, in another aspect, in the other associate like this. So that's why Mahaprabhu, is just the whole um, let's say the whole compassion for for everyone, each and everyone, and it comes into um, the associates in their own respective perspectives also to relate to him, and that's what is a mood that comes through their traditions. So if we know Vishaka, who is so similar to Radharani, it's just like one with her, but there is another Gopi, and that is the we know this as a tradition of the Parivar and Dvaita Parivar know the truth from their own perspective. We cannot clash everyone into their differences. You know, we cannot just say they are wrong because they see it from that place, or they are wrong because they see it from that place. It's to a point that we are saying that everyone can be right.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And of course, to clarify to any viewers who may be watching or may come on later, when we're talking about here, we're talking about the different moods and perspective of the consciousness towards pure devotion towards Radha Krishna Chaitanya and relationships thereof. Of course, this does not include different siddhantas altogether that are not super personal. Basically, as long as the siddhanta is super personal in nature, where there's no impersonal traces or tinges, those
Mm.
siddhantas and understandings are correct. But the second that impersonal tinges come in, that is when a practice or an ideology can be called out for being false or bogus or misleading. Because the truth, of course, being personal in nature, super personal, hyper personal in nature. Yeah, so this is a very good point. In fact, my friend, I think we have a lot of good stuff that we can actually pick up our next conversation with from here. But for this one, I think today we'll be signing off pretty soon here. And so I hope you enjoyed the chat, the conversation. You can see Nicholas
Yeah,
Paris. He has very deep realizations, and he gets very enthusiastic about these topics related to these deep knowledge and aspects, which is why I love conversations with him. And but here's the thing, in the midst, sometimes we've had clashes or heated, intense discussions on this, but within the midst of it, I always feel very uplifted and always happy talking to you. So
thanks. Thanks. Me also.
you know,
Actually, today also is a very good spiritual day. Um, 2 days ago, there was a big issue about our ancestors.
mhm.
That was celebration about the new moon. But very important also today celebrated Bob Marley's birthday 74 years ago. And actually, I try to see it everything globally, not as a from our own perspective only. It's just a big dance, and I like also to relate to devotees who are also even more developed or walking the same mm, from the same to same.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Well, all glories to you, my friend. All glories to everyone who may be watching, to the previous acharyas. All glories to Shri Shri Radha Krishna,
Jai Ho.
Chaitanya Nityananda, Purnananda, Balarama. Hare Krishna. We'll talk to you all later, and you have a good evening, my friends.
Jai Nitai.
Jai Nitai. Hare